Hello there and welcome. In this video we're going to look at what some regard as filtering on dual carriageways and motorways. So it's becoming very commonplace to see motorcycles sliding through the traffic on these high-speed roads. And when the traffic is stationary or crawling along, filtering is to be expected. But what about when the traffic is travelling at 40, 50, 60 or even 70 miles an hour? We still see motorcycles cutting through the various lanes on these roads. So as we know, filtering in the UK has no legal definition. Lane splitting is a term we often hear. This is usually associated from countries other than the UK. In the Highway Code, Rules 88 and 160 reference filtering. So this suggests it's acceptable, and we know from case law that indeed filtering in the UK is legal. So when we look into it, filtering is regarded as a slow manoeuvre, and this is suggested by Highway Code Rule 88, which states, when filtering in slow moving traffic, take care and keep your speed low. So it doesn't mention or advise about travelling fast or in faster traffic. Now we don't actually have a legal definition of what slow is in exact miles per hour, so it's going to be subjective. But case law suggests that courts regard slow as where the traffic is stationary, travelling at around 10 or 15 miles an hour, and they consider that to be reasonable. Apparently 25 miles an hour has been held not to be reasonable. Another indication that comes from case law suggests that filtering becomes overtaking if the traffic is moving and not stationary or stop-start. Okay, so let's look at these clips. So in this first clip, the speed limit is 50 miles an hour and the traffic is travelling at around about 40. It's fairly dense, bearing in mind it's the morning rush hour. So we see the motorcycle approaching here and he's splitting the lanes, which could be regarded as filtering. But bearing in mind the speed of the traffic is about 40 miles an hour, this would suggest that he's undertaking rather than filtering. His style of riding seems to be relatively erratic, and at one point he appears to only have one hand on the handlebars and he's fairly close to other vehicles. This would suggest to me that he could be riding without due care and attention, and he's creating safety issues for himself. In this next clip we've got a two-lane motorway. The traffic is generally travelling at around the 70 mile an hour speed limit. So we can see the two motorcyclists coming up from behind, and they are using both lanes to make progress. What can we say about this? This isn't filtering. It's clearly undertaking and clearly in excess of the speed limit. Legally, it looks like a driving without due care and attention as a minimum, and notice how the riders do not appear to be wearing gloves either. So this is a fairly high risk activity, and if it did go wrong, the injuries would not be very pleasant. The actual style of riding is putting themselves at risk. And you'll see why in this next clip. So here we have a single red sports bike, yet again a motorway, with the traffic travelling mainly at 70 miles an hour. This motorcyclist is undertaking, he's not filtering. And notice how the white pickup that you can see ahead is now lane changing. So this is quite legitimate for the vehicle to do, but if you are travelling at high speed up the middle of two lanes on a motorway, this manoeuvre, if the driver doesn't check his blind spot or his mirrors, it's going to result in a very serious incident for you. Don't expect other drivers to check their blind spots or their mirrors before they manoeuvre, because they often won't, as you'll see in this clip here. So this vehicle either didn't check his mirror before he signalled and manoeuvred, or just completely ignored the vehicle behind, or didn't react correctly to what he saw. However, he has changed lanes not very appropriately in front of an oncoming vehicle. That could be you on your bike. Have a quick look at this clip here. You'll see in the distance there's an ambulance on blue lights, and you can see how many drivers don't check their mirrors very often. So mirror checks should actually be done every few seconds, and you should have a constant awareness and an update of what's going on behind you. And I've noticed a lot of motorcycles these days travelling with hazard lights on as they filter. If motorists aren't seeing blue flashing lights, they're not going to take any notice of hazard lights. Notice how this Mercedes estate obstructs the ambulance for over 60 seconds before it finally moves out of the way. And if they don't check their mirrors and they can't see a large vehicle with blue flashing lights and sirens going, they're certainly not going to see you on your motorcycle. In this last clip here, we can see a motorcyclist yet again cutting between the two lanes on a two-lane motorway. Fortunately for this biker, the driver and the camera car did check their mirrors. So the traffic was travelling at about 55 miles an hour, and the car indicated right as it wished to make a legitimate manoeuvre to lane 2. The motorcycle's presence prevented the car from making the manoeuvre. Hence why the motorcyclist then got a bit upset by waving his hand around, presumably saying, well, what are you going to do? If he hadn't been trying to undertake, there would not have been a problem here. So the bike eventually decides to commit, even though the car has left its right hand signal on. And we know the advice in the highway code is to hang back and wait. Don't take the risk if the signal is on. Highway Code Rule 60 says, drive or ride with both hands on the wheel or handlebars where possible. Well, it is possible here. This will help you remain in full control of the vehicle at all times. So in this situation here, we have an issue of potential careless driving. Quite apart from that, he's put his own personal safety at risk. If that car driver hadn't checked their mirrors or their blind spot and had changed lane, that would have been the end of it. So when we look at these various manoeuvres on high-speed roads, there's 4 things that I'd like you to consider. The first is legality. Highway code advice can be used to prosecute you for careless or dangerous driving. So if you go against the advice in the highway code, you could easily be convicted. So Rule 88 says, additionally, when filtering in slow-moving traffic, take care and keep your speed low. Rule 160 says, keep to the left unless road signs or markings indicate otherwise. The exceptions are when you want to overtake, turn right or pass parked vehicles or pedestrians in the road. Be aware of other road users, especially cycles and motorcycles who may be filtering through the traffic. This is a suggestion here that filtering is indeed legal. Notice how it says overtake, not undertake. Rule 163 refers to overtaking, and it has a whole list of advice there. A couple of important parts of this rule say only overtake on the left if the vehicle in front is signalling to turn right and there is room to do so. Rule 151 mentions slow-moving traffic. 2 parts of this that are quite relevant for us. It says you should not change lanes to the left to overtake, but it also says be aware of cyclists and motorcyclists who may be passing on either side. But notice here the reference to slow-moving traffic. So it's accepted that motorcyclists are going to filter and they could be on either side of the traffic, but it doesn't mention high-speed roads. So if we look at motorway rules, Rule 264 says keep in the left lane unless overtaking. If you are overtaking, you should return to the left lane when it's safe to do so. It also goes on to say in Rule 267, overtake only on the right. Rule 268 also says, do not overtake on the left or move to a lane on your left to overtake. It also says, do not weave in and out of lanes to overtake. The second issue, if there is an incident, think about the litigation and insurance payouts. Awards will be pro rata according to your actions and observance of the highway code, and any awards could be reduced or even end up with costs against you. Insurance companies will be looking for any reason not to pay out. One other issue worth considering is other road users' perception. So unsafe and aggressive riding can lead to road rage incidents where other drivers will take their anger out on you, and you're quite vulnerable on a bike, as you know. And the other problem with this is that where a lot of drivers see this sort of riding, they will hold it against other bikers. So when they are filtering legitimately, very often that can also result in an incident. And the last one is your personal safety. If you're not seen and a vehicle swaps lane, as we've said, you're going to come off at very high speed. That collision will be serious or even fatal. If you hit the Armco, the central reservation barriers, you hit another vehicle, and you're very likely, once you're lying in the carriageway, to be run over by another vehicle that can't stop on these high-speed roads. So the faster you go, the more likely you won't be seen, and the worse the outcome of any collision. Now, I completely understand people wanting to get from A to B. You know, the freedom of a bike and making good progress, yeah, we love it, of course we do. And it does get frustrating out there when roads are congested and you see other road users with poor lane discipline dawdling around in lane 2, lane 3, and you just want to get to where you need to go. I get it, and ultimately your decisions are up to you. From my perspective, try to keep the discipline and try not to get carried away with things, because if it goes wrong, the cost to you is going to be very, very high. As we say, just because it fits doesn't mean you should put it there, and it's always better to be late than dead on time. So I hope some of this video has been useful, and until next time, ride safe and take care.